So thanks for turning up tonight, folks. My name is Andy Harrison. I work at Oracle. I work in RPE, Engineered Systems. Myself and my colleague Keith Bond support Solaris on Exadata, Exalogic and SuperCluster. I came here 2 years ago to get a talk about T4, so this is the next generation T5. So what I want to do is kind of give you an introduction to the hardware and the bits and bobs in it, talk a bit about how it can help you learn your TCO, talk about some use cases, talk about some of the multitude of configuration options you can choose from, talk about patching, and then depends on how you guys feel. If you feel like asking questions in between each of the component sections, then feel free and I can go and jump in the box. So I have access to a full rack T5 supercluster that's in Santa Clara. The link does work, which is good. So we can jump on and look around, and feel free to, if you want to look at anything specific that I don't cover, then let me know and we can take it. I used this slide last time, and let me try and explain this one. So, my previous life was with Sun, and I used to work in an interoperability group. And one of the biggest problems we had was customers using multiple vendors and getting into complex situations trying to deal with problems and not knowing who to go to. They went to one vendor, it's not our problem, go and speak to them. And there was some use in Veritas, Oracle and Sun as it was back then. We formed a joint escalation centre and we worked together to help customers stop playing piggy in the middle. So Sun worked with Oracle and produced Exadata, one of the first engineered systems. But the concept for it really is, if you're a wildebeest, you're better off staying with the herd. You're better off staying within a known, safe environment. Because if you go off, the lions are going to pick you off. So that is talk about start getting obscure configurations, then you're going into no man's land. So that's the real kind of idea behind it. So moving on from T4 supercluster, we've got T5-8. Now, from my colleagues talking to customers at Open World, when T4 first came out, and I know I talked to some of you before, but people didn't seem to quite grasp the concept of where Oracle was going with this engineered system. We already have Exadata, Exalogic, Exadata looking at the database side of the stack, Exalogic looking at the middleware, front end. That kind of cornered those sorts of markets, but there was nothing for a kind of general purpose. They kind of get the best of breed, get Exadata, Exalogic, and some general purpose usage. So SuperCluster came about. And obviously the same ethos as Exadata and Exalogic, you want to reduce your time to deployment. And you also want to lower your TCO. And I'll talk a bit about that a bit later on. And it kind of avoids the what works with what. Going into the lone wildebeest in the plains, getting picked off because he's gone to some weird obscure configuration. We try and keep it in a consistent, known, well-tested, well-known situation. So what's in it? Compared to T4, it's 2.5 times quicker and you've got 33% more storage capacity. They've upped a lot of the components. Obviously, they're going from T4 to T5. A lot of the other components have been upgraded in disk sizes, so you've got more to play with. In terms of the T5, twice as many cores, slightly higher clock speed, more cache, more memory bandwidth, so you can do more with it. So, what do you get in it? What do you get for your money? In a full rack, what they've done that's different to T4 is instead of supplying, with T4 you have 4 compute nodes. With T5 they've gone for 2, and that won't change as the number of compute nodes. What they've done is to reduce the number of components or CPU and memory components in the rack. So you get 2 terabytes of memory in each of the T5s. You get your 8 InfiniBand HCAs, 8 10 gig NICs, a bunch of SAS disks, an optional fibre channel, and lots and lots of varied configuration choices are available on both the full rack and half rack. So I won't read each line, you can more than capable of reading those yourself. And with the half rack, you get half the number of T5 processors, half amount of memory, etc. etc. Has anyone got any questions around sort of the base two config types? Silence is good.
Excuse me, please. Can I just ask how much you're going to cover Exadata? Because that's what I came for, or is it the end?
I will talk about some of the Exadata components. Exadata is not my speciality, so I have more of a Solaris background. So as SuperCluster is half Exadata, half general purpose, then it kind of encompasses a multitude of things. I will look at, have you got an Exadata? Have you had any experience with Exadata?
Just about to.
Oh, okay. The components which are used in SuperCluster, as in the Exadata storage cells, are exactly the same. So what I will do is jump on to some a bit later and sort of show you what they are and just a little bit of background for it. It goes without saying, if you want the more in-depth vector data, vector logic, then yeah, we can either get someone to come back and talk about the specific components. If you want to see demos of some pretend benchmark schemas and start playing them, we can probably sort that out for you. But if you have any questions and I can't answer them, I'll go away and find out some more for you and let you know. So. The same as T4 SuperCluster, you have the option to upgrade. So now that T5-8 is out, you can no longer purchase T4 SuperCluster. But what you can do is you can opt for a half rack T4 to a full rack T4 SuperCluster. And we offer the same option with T5 as well. So you do buy a half rack and you decide that doesn't hit your business needs, then you can upgrade and continue expanding. So, the SuperCluster has two of these units in there. They're big old beasts. With the half rack, you only get 4 T5 16-core CPUs. Obviously, with the full rack, you get 8. And then, depending on whether it's the half or full rack configuration, you either get 16 or 128 16 machines. In terms of the number of PCI expansion slots, you've got 16 in both, and I'll show you in a bit later on that all 16 PCI slots are active, irrelevant of whether you go for a half rack or full rack. But there are specific use cases for slots and the cards we put in them to ensure we get balanced I/O, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. They've got all the usual hardware availability components in there, RAID, hotspot, some PSUs, ILOM, and Enterprise Managed Rock Center, which we use as a management tool for SuperCluster for monitoring and alerts on the Solaris side of things and the hardware. For the database side of things, you're looking at Enterprise Manager. And I will, again, show you a bit about Ops Center later on.
Question. Sorry. I'm new as well in this, so but it's important for me to understand how
Sure.
this works, because sometimes the client is talking and I don't understand anything. Tell me about this Oracle Enterprise Manager Ops Center. This is a particular thing for Sun, or it's a software that Oracle provides for Sun?
Ops Center comes as a free optional option for SuperCluster. So when we go to deploy on a customer site, say you buy a half or full rack T4, T5, you have the option for us to install and enable the embedded Ops Center on the SuperCluster. And if you have existing Ops Center servers in your estate, then what will happen is the SuperCluster will get discovered as a single entity. So hence why it's called the embedded op center version. So, and you could use that to set up your monitoring, your alerts, your performance stats, anything else you want to do.
So you can use the one that you already have?
Yes, yes. So if you've got an existing op center server, yes, what will happen is it will just pop up as a single, you'll see your supercluster.
Okay, yes.
And then once you click on the supercluster itself, you'll jump onto the embedded op center and you'll see all the components of the supercluster.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I can show you the embedded op center a bit later.
Thanks.
If I'm rushing through, folks, what I want to do is I don't want to just talk at you because it gets a bit boring after a while. What I want to do is to kind of whiz through some of the slides and then jump onto the box, and that's probably what you really want to see. You'll have a poke around. And as I said to some of you earlier, if there's things you want to see and I'm not showing you, please tell me and we can go and have a look. So in terms of configuration options, a bit later when we look at the configuration options available on the platform in terms of how you slice and dice the hardware up, a lot of it is related to the processor modules and the I/O, the PCI I/O root complex. So these little numbers here relate to paths down through the PCI bus switches to the PCI card slots. And again, I'll show you a bit later. I don't want to get too focused in on the internals of these PCI stuff because it's not something I understand in depth. As I found out today from talking to a hardware colleague, it can get really complex. And there are some configuration options that we are not too concerned about. One of the things that is worth mentioning, again I'll talk about it later, is the way we do slice and dice things up. So in terms of the maximum number of LDOMs you can have on a half rack is 4. And it's 4 because it's based on the number of root complexes. And they must be configured in pairs. So, also worth noting is the highlighted slots on the express modules are where we put the InfiniBand, dual port InfiniBand card and the 10 gig NIC. And again, I'll explain a bit about that later. Is everyone on the same page? Good. Obviously things get slightly more complicated with the full rack. So the clever stuff does happen internally with the PCI switches. They can reconfigure themselves, but in the supercluster we tell it not to. The reason being is when we for example, go from a half rack to a full rack upgrade, we want one device path is changing from our existing configuration, because that would be a bit of a nightmare, wouldn't it? And especially when things can get a little bit complex in terms of your configuration options. Certainly going for a T5-8 full rack, you can potentially have 8 domains per T5. So in a full rack, 16 potential LDOMs to go and look after. The things are simplified by using a management tool to look after the domain. As I said, the supercluster is the best of both worlds, multiple worlds in terms of its ability to provide the Exadata stack, Exalogic and general purpose storage. Exadata is very clever. The Exadata storage cells, as we don't work in Exadata engineering, we refer to them as they contain special secret sauce. As far as we're concerned about going down the Exadata path, what you're trying to do, and I've got a great example in a moment of what we've done internally, is for customers who are experiencing very high database load and are seeing extreme high I/O utilization on their database machines, Exadata one part can help out.